All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I am still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, where the foliage is out in full force today. Jon Tayler, feeling great, getting out and about in that this afternoon. Up there in New York City. Fangraphs Jon Tayler. The skyline is immaculate.
I'm gonna try that again. New York City. That's better. I was just remarking on that to myself earlier. I gotta this time of year when the light is just right, since we're taping these in the evening, for that skyline to look like that. It's really something.
It is top notch. Do you get any foliage? Like, is it Central Park? Is that your only go-to?
New York City isn't big on trees. We don't seem to trust them. But what trees we do have, their colors do change. But more usually, you gotta get out of the city and go upstate.
Well, there you go. Have you done that?
I've done. Well, not this year, not yet.
Okay.
Planning to do it toward the end of the month, once the playoffs are a little more. Once we are past the point where it's like, hey, 4 games of baseball, you're going to be watching baseball for 13 straight hours. Yeah. That'll make it a little easier, I think.
Did the Braves win the World Series 11 days later from now last year?
Well, what's funny is I saw a Red Sox beat writer tweeting about how today is the 36th anniversary of Dave Henderson's basically ALCS winning home run in 86.
Yeah.
And just thinking for a moment, I was like, the pennant had already been decided by the middle of October back then.
Yeah. Whereas
we are still, who knows how many games away, just even from the pennant being over, much less the playoffs being over. I for the most part liked the wild card round. I do not like that the playoffs are now like 5.5 weeks long, and and also at the same rate, I think I like the baseball quadruple header more in theory than in reality, because in reality it's just kind of tough to, especially like with the afternoon start times, with having to stagger the start times, with something like today where because of the rain in Atlanta, now we're gonna have both second games of the NLDS starting at exactly the same time, or roughly the same time. Yeah, I mean, it's weird. It's weird to think how much longer the playoffs both feel and now genuinely are.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, some of that too is also the fact that since we lost the first week of the season, scheduling wise to the lockout, everything just got pushed back a week. But yeah. It definitely feels late in a lot of ways for us to be only at the start of the division series.
If Cleveland makes the World Series, we're gonna have a snowmageddon situation.
Yeah, I'm worried about, like, if it's New York in the World Series. By the time they're playing those first games, like end of October, beginning of November, it's gonna be like 35 degrees outside.
Yeah,
let's just be really glad that the Twins didn't make the playoffs.
Oh my God.
Or the Tigers,
I think we can hold our breath on that becoming.
I will be saying that at least for the next like 5 years.
Yeah. I will say it's funny to like monitor like fan bases who are new to playoff baseball losing their minds. Like Mariners fans are already exhausted. You see that where they're like, oh, we're good. We didn't realize it was going to be like this up and down, and you're just the emotional roller coaster of playoff baseball. I mean, when you haven't been a part of it in so long, and then be on just the trajectory that the Mariners are on right now, or even just the Phillies, where the Phillies fans are like, oh my God, do we buy in? What is happening? What are we doing here?
At least the great majority of Phillies fans, by virtue of being Philadelphia sports fans, are just clinically insane. And it's like, this doesn't affect them because they're too broken to feel anything anymore. I feel for Mariners fans, not just because this is the first time they've done this in 21 years. And not just because this team is very clearly a likable team and a good team that they're going to feel good about no matter where this team goes, but also that in the span of 3 games they went from one of the greatest comebacks in MLB postseason history in beating Toronto and advancing to the wild card or to the division series, to one of the most gut punch losses I can remember a team taking in the first game of the LDS when Yordan Alvarez just blasted them into hell. Like that particular roller coaster that's really, I was saying, is sometimes, like, for Mariners fans, sometimes it's a nice reminder. Sometimes the playoffs really suck.
Yep.
Like sometimes playoff games are are just terrible. They just hurt. They hurt in a way that like you didn't even know you could hurt. Like playoff games are tough,
I've
man.
said that baseball, this is across the board, college or pro. I think baseball postseason losses hurt more than any other sport. Like series loss, I think it hurts the most.
I think the only comparable one in my mind is NHL postseason games,
Hmm.
especially if it's an NHL overtime postseason game. I think NHL overtime postseason is the single most stressful, difficult form of postseason play imaginable. The idea that your season your game, your series, your season can end in a second, and that's just that. That's really tough.
Yeah.
I know also, obviously, World Cup games, once they get to elimination games, those are brutal. Those are really, really hard.
I think it's interesting. There's a lot of world, and we're going to experience that this fall as well. That's so weird that it's happening this fall as well. But it's funny because so many of my friends and people I grew up with like living and dying by the men's national team, and I never understood it. Where I was like, there's no path to them winning the World Cup. Like that's not a thing. Why are you getting so emotionally invested in this thing that can absolutely not happen? That is not a thing that can happen. It will not happen this year. I will never once be emotionally invested in an American World Cup run. Maybe I should just emotionally invest in the motherland with my name being extremely British, especially.
No, I mean, if you want to pick the team that's going to find a way to hurt you even deeper,
pick
then
England.
The England men's national team is probably your best choice.
There you go. Although, can't lose.
On the one hand, it's coming home. It's always going to come home. It's football's coming home. Yeah. On the other hand, it's England. Like it's never coming home. So, yeah, I really feel for Mariners fans again to go from that high to that low. And to know, too, that, like, I mean, for whatever reason, the American League, the Division Series, and the AL had the day off today where the NL didn't. But that's the other thing. It's like you just got to buck up and do it again. You got to do it all over again, you know?
Well, let's talk about the wild card round because tonight we have, like you said, the NL DS games, game 2 for Pods Dodgers, and the Dodgers are up 1-0. And then the Braves have not played as of yet in this series against the Phillies. I'm excited to see what game 1 looks like in this regard.
I'd forgotten that they took the field yesterday and everyone's like, you know what? It doesn't feel right yet. Let's wait till tomorrow.
Yeah, it was just not enough people were there. Traffic in Atlanta was bad. Or like the vibes weren't good. We were always very, very concerned about the vibes for any particular playoff baseball game. But this was the first wild card expansion postseason, the best of 3 series. Wait,
didn't we get one in 2020?
Was it the same?
I think it was, yeah, because that was it? Yeah, because that was
well, I think the difference too, remember, is there was no home stadiums. I don't think they were playing in their home stadiums for 3 games.
You know what? The less I think about the 2020 season and postseason in general, the better. So let's forget it. No one needs to think about 2020. bad postseason.
I don't remember a lot of that. And yeah, no, it's all a jumbled mess. But in terms of this one being the official, like this is the new status quo for the Major League Baseball postseason for the foreseeable future. We get a 3-game series, and every single third game, John, I kept looking and I was like, why are they here? Why are they still in New York? Why are they still in St. Louis? Because I just completely forgot that this was not, this was all in one location for all 3. And I was like, that's not fair. Every time, like, it was just the dumbest thought where I'm like, I knew this. Why am I still just like, why are they still there?
And it makes sense when you think about it, because it's like, well, of course, like that's the punishment for being the lower seed is that you get 0 home games. But yeah, I'd also, literally even when like the games 1 were happening, and I'm just sitting there being like, so they are going to go to, as like everyone is saying, it's like, oh, Seattle's not going to get a chance to host a postseason game unless they advance. I'm like, what do you mean? If they force a game 3, no, they can't. Like literally as like game 2 is happening, I'm like, what are they talking about? All they got to do is anyway.
Well, my first question to you, John, the biggest wild card surprises for you was what?
I think the way Toronto went out was really surprising to me. I forget. I've already forgotten what postseason picks I made for our Fangraphs predictions, which should probably tell you a lot about the value of random people predictions. But I don't remember if I went with Seattle or Toronto. I think I went with Toronto. In my mind, it was pretty much a coin flip. But I did not see Toronto. I did not see Alek Manoah and Kevin Gausman just flat out not performing. I didn't see Toronto's offense for the most part going dead silent. And even with, the runs they scored in game 2, the great majority of that was Teoscar Hernandez, who had a fantastic game, but everyone else didn't really show up. I think we all knew that the Toronto bullpen was going to be a problem for them. I didn't expect them to be up there with one of the worst single game collapses in postseason history.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that individual game 2 was probably the single most surprising result overall, with the possible exception of the Phillies managing not to Phillies it hard enough to lose to St. Louis. Although I will say I picked Philly to advance there, so I felt pretty good about that one.
Mm-hmm.
I think overall, though, I think the Mets, I feel like it kind of has to be the Mets. 101 win team. They led the NL East almost wire to wire. Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom starting games 1 and 2 against a Padres team that was good, but certainly didn't look like the equal of the Mets or really of any of the other kind of top tier contenders. And the Mets flat out just did not play well in any of those 3 games. Obviously, Scherzer pitched terribly in game 1. DeGrom was okay in game 2. I think the common factor for both of them, they just really did not have good fastball command. I'm wondering how much Scherzer was still struggling with the after effects of his oblique injury. I'm wondering if DeGrom, to a certain degree, had just kind of run out of steam by that point, given all the various injuries he's worked his way back from. And I wonder if it just didn't click for some reason. And especially, too, the way they went out just dead quiet in game 3. Joe Musgrove shut them down so completely. There was just no fight left in that team. That was really kind of surprising to me. I thought I didn't think the Mets were good enough to win the World Series. And truthfully, I mean, maybe it's recency bias, but that series against Atlanta, I think, really shook the confidence I had in that team to go deep into the playoffs. But I really thought they would at least make it to the division series, at least give the Dodgers a good fight, especially with the way things were set up for them, that they had their 2 aces on the mound to start the first 2 games. All they had to do was win those 2 games and they're in, and they just couldn't do it. And that, I think, I don't necessarily know if it makes me rethink whether the Mets actually were as good as their record was, because I do think they were as good as their record was. I don't think they fluked their way to 101 wins, unless you count, they got to face the Nationals and the Marlins 38 times as part of that, which, sure, that helps, but the Dodgers got to face the Rockies 19 times. The Yankees got to face the Red Sox 19 times. The Guardians got to face the Royals and the Tigers 38 times. Like, every team that is in the playoffs gets that advantage to a certain degree. So, did I think the Mets were a really serious World Series contender? Maybe not so much. Did I think they were going to bounce out in the first round, especially the way they did? No, I don't know how many people saw that one coming.
I will say, I texted friend of the pod, fellow sports reporter Bob Silverman of the Daily Beast, who's a rabid Mets fan.
Long suffering, we call them.
Long suffering. David Roth too. He had a good tweet after their elimination. Another friend of the pod, David. Thoughts and prayers to both David and Bob.
Thoughts and prayers to all Mets fans. That from the Atlanta series onward, that was a pretty brutal way to finish the season.
Pretty brutal, but look, I mean, I cover everything. Look, the world champion banner is behind me. The Braves, look, that is a part of it, but I can still look at this objectively, which is, I don't think this was a collapse by the Mets. I don't. I think part of what we saw down the stretch for this team, and I look, the Max Scherzer thing in game 1 was incredibly surprising. I don't think any of us saw that coming, but you go down with Scherzer and DeGrom. Like, you're okay if that's how things go. Look, that sucks. That really, really sucks. But the odds of Scherzer having that kind of outing in game 1, if you play that game over 100 times, pretty slim to none.
Yeah.
That is the result. And unfortunately, it's that capital T that's and capital B baseball. But I really think that's what happened here. And I think when you have these small sample size series, a 3-game series, a lot can happen. And I texted Bob ahead of that series where I was like, I think the Braves, this happens to the Braves too, if they get the pods. And we talked about it on the pod, Padres talking about that on the pod. That's fun to say.
I'm surprised there isn't a Padres podcast just called Padres Pod.
Yeah, free. You can have it. We're not going to copyright it. Like, y'all can have it.
Some Padres fan out there, do it.
Exactly. you look at the away record, like this was a team that was so good on the road all season long. They were a better road team than home team. And I wouldn't know part of that, where I was like, the Braves, I do not need to mess with the Padres in a 3-game series. Don't want any part of it. That's why the division was so important. And you saw that with the Padres. And now, I mean, they're down 0-1 as this recording to the Dodgers, but the Dodgers are the Dodgers. And I don't know. It's just a rough way of ending the season, of going to Atlanta, things not going well, and then getting a team that is just built for playing on the road and just wanted nothing more than to use their power to just outpower a team like the Mets, who I think that might be my biggest thing going into this offseason. If they could redo it, I'm sure Epler and Cohen would say we should have added more power at the
Yeah,
deadline.
I
That
think
was something where we messed up.
people made the good point that that was a good offense, but one that did not have a lot of guys who have a lot of home run power. That a lot of the home runs were Pete Alonso, it was Francisco Lindor, it was a healthy Starling Marte, and for as much as he was able to play and looked for the most part fine, they obviously didn't have a fully healthy Starling Marte. But I think you made a good point that, you know, just the same as with that Atlanta series, the Mets just got straight up beat. You know, I don't know that there's one moment, this isn't something where it's like you can point to one inning, one moment, one pitch and be like, aha, that's the reason right there. They just got beat. And you can certainly point to a variety of reasons as to why they got beat. I mean, for as much as we couldn't have seen that with Scherzer coming, at the same time, he's 37 years old. He was coming off that oblique injury. Those are the kinds of things that are going to happen more likely than not with an older pitcher, is that they are going to get hurt more easily and have a harder time shrugging off those injuries or recovering from them. Similarly, with a guy like DeGrom, like there are obstacles that exist with someone like him because of the way he pitches and what he has done to get to this point, which is just that he is the best pitcher on the planet, but it comes at a pretty seemingly significant cost. I think it said a lot about the Mets that, you know, that their plan apparently during game 2 was, we're just going to put Edwin Diaz out there until he literally cannot pitch anymore. And I think when that happened, I was like, oh, this team actually isn't all that well set up for this actually right now.
Yeah.
Like, it was kind of shocking to realize they don't really have a bullpen that Buck Showalter trusts at this particular moment. And similarly, when you saw Tomas Nido hitting or starting at catcher all 3 of those games, you kind of had that moment. I had that moment of like, how in the world have the Mets ended up in a position where they're starting Tomas Nido in must-win games?
Yeah.
You know, that just shouldn't happen. Similarly with and I think a Darren Ruff, Dan Vogelbach platoon should have worked. There's no reason why it shouldn't have. But again, similar, it's like, why don't you have a better player to use than a combination of Dan Vogelbach and Darren Ruff? You know, that's just not really ideal. And so I think those are some of the smaller things you can point to be like, maybe this Mets team wasn't actually in as good a position as we thought they were. But I agree with you that I don't think this was the Mets. And similarly with this series, I don't think this was the Mets blowing anything. I think the only time it really felt like the Mets just kind of weren't there was against Musgrove, where they just flat out were not ready to hit against him. But again, I think that can be chalked more up to they just got beat. You know, a team that was not necessarily better, but that had its advantages, came in and just played better baseball in the innings and the minutes that counted.
And look, I'm glad they didn't move on from Epler and Buck Showalter. That would have been a insane overreaction.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think this is a Mets. I don't think this is a situation where, despite losing the division late in the season and despite not making it out of the first round of the playoffs, I don't think this is something where you need to clean house or anything.
Yeah. And I'm interested to see what they do this winter. I'm going to go ahead and guess that they're going to go for power. I would not be surprised if they try and figure out how they can fit Carlos Correa into this lineup. That wouldn't surprise me.
I could see them trying something. I mean, I think part of it too is, you know, you see how much can we realistically expect from Brett Baty and Francisco Alvarez in terms of, you know, guys who will hopefully be around next year and we can start the season with them and maybe they can give us a youth boost. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the other part of it for me with this postseason series is you think about the Mets after it and you're like, this team still has some work to do genuinely to be a true World Series contender. And I think of all the teams that got eliminated in the wild card series, I think they're the one that's I think it's going to be tough for them to return a team next year that is as good as this one was. They're going to have to get creative because Obviously, we know DeGrom is opting out of his contract. He will be a free agent. I don't think that makes it a fait accompli that he won't return. I certainly, there doesn't seem to be any reason he wouldn't return other than the Mets not giving him more money than another team. But obviously, they'll have that to deal with. Edwin Diaz is a free agent. Brandon Nimmo is a free agent. Chris Bassett, if his mutual option is not exercised, will become a free agent. Taijuan Walker will be a free agent. Carlos Carrasco will be a free agent. Adam Ottavino will be a free agent. There are a lot of guys that they need to make a decision on. Okay, if we want to bring them back, how exactly do we do it? On top of that, you look at their payroll status right now. The baseball reference figures for this are a little wonky because they're counting DeGrom's money as guaranteed, and he has an option for $32.5 million for next season that he's not going to exercise, so you can wipe that off the books. But right now, Baseball Reference has their projected payroll next year to be $20-some million shy of $300 million. And that's not counting, again, subtract DeGrom, but that's also not counting Diaz, Nimmo, Walker, Carrasco, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to have to, luckily for them, arbitration is not that big a thing, but one of the big things for them is going to be Pete Alonso entering his second year of arbitration, projected to make around $15 million through that. I imagine they're going to have to start having some conversations about if or what a long-term deal for him would look like, and if they want to extend one to him. They obviously need to, even if they bring DeGrom back, and even if they exercise Bassett's mutual option, which is $19 million for a 33-year-old pitcher is, without really swing and miss stuff like that, like Bassett is not that kind of guy, that feels a little risky to me. And I can imagine that's going to be a really tough conversation for the Mets front office as to what they want to do with him. Beyond that, though, they still need to add 2 more starters to that group because Walker and Carrasco are both free agents. I kind of have a hard time seeing either returning.
You don't think Walker's back?
I don't think so. I think he's just not reliable enough for them to count on. Too many injury issues and too much kind of up and down performance.
Well, it might depend on if DeGrom's gone, right? Like if DeGrom's gone, they might have to just be like, all right, we got to keep who we can, even if we're not feeling great.
Right. But then the other part of that too is they also need to add, they needed to add bullpen help, even if Diaz were still under contract, and he won't be. And he's going to go out and get himself the biggest deal he possibly can, because he can argue, hey, I'm the best closer in baseball. I don't really know who his competition is even in that regard at this point.
Yeah.
And again, his top setup guy in Ottavino will also be walking. So they have a lot of work they need to do just to keep the core of that team, of this year's team, together. And you can argue pretty decisively that they need to improve on that core too. So I don't really see a way that the Mets come out of this offseason with a payroll under $300 million. Which is nonsense to think about, and is also the kind of thing that you're really going to see just how much money Steve Cohen wants to spend. Because again, they have a lot of holes that they need to fill some way or another. Their farm system is not yet at the point where it can start backfilling some of those. I think the exception here being at catcher, where they really did not get any production throughout the course of the season. I think they're just going to go with Alvarez from day one and just hope for the best. Similarly, I think at third base, you're probably going to see Batty come up as soon as is possible, and they're just going to ride with him. But that brings its own series of risks, obviously. And regardless, you still got to spend money on all those other places. Even if you want to bringing DeGrom, Diaz, and Nimmo back for starters is going to cost you probably somewhere in the neighborhood of, let's call it $55 to $60 million. And that's just to bring those 3 guys back. And like you said, they need to add power. They need to add bullpen arms. They need to add back of the rotation arms. They need to add depth. This is going to be a really, really tricky offseason for the Mets, I think. It's going to be, at the very least, one that is going to make them have to think very creatively to figure out how to keep building this team for the future without essentially having to spend $350 million a year to do it.
We're going to see. It's going to be an interesting offseason in New York, nonetheless, John. Speaking of what they could potentially do, and we'll see if they get involved in any of these sweepstakes, but your team, Pedro Martinez, have you heard about him? Have you heard about Pedro Martinez?
No idea what this is.
He warns the Red Sox. This is how you know your organization is a healthy one right now, and it's in a healthy, positive place, is when one of the best all-time, best pitchers of all time, best players in your organization's history of all time, is publicly warning your franchise not to let two particular players walk. Probably with this Mookie Betts figure who is still playing important baseball in October.
No idea who that is either.
Yeah. Well, Bogaerts, he is warning them to not let Xander Bogaerts and Rafael Devers walk this winter. Not a good sign, I would say, John. I love your face as we talk about the Red Sox.
Yeah, can you
are
just
they both out?
see
Like,
the?
Are you ready?
Well, because here's the funny thing about this. So I'm in looking over offseason stuff with regards to the Bogaerts and Devers stuff. Like, yeah, I agree. Like, if I agree with Pedro Martinez. This, or at least with the idea behind it, that like this is not a contending team without either of those two guys. And they'll have Bogaerts or at least Devers for one more year. He can't walk until after next year. So at the very least, unless they decide to trade him, he'll be there opening day 2023. But Bogaerts is obviously going to opt out of his contract. He has an opt out, same as DeGrom does. So he's going to test the market. This is his first chance to hit free agency, probably going to be his last chance. He's a great hitter, a good shortstop. He has been one of the most reliable presences on that team since his rookie season. He would make any other team that needs a shortstop very, very happy. And I think most importantly for the Red Sox is there's no plan to replace him right now. There is long-term with Marcelo Mayer, their top 5 pick from now 2 drafts ago, who was I believe the best shortstop available in that draft. Very highly touted by evaluators, very clearly the shortstop of the future in Boston. But obviously, one, he is like 19 or 20 years old. There is no guarantee that that's going to happen either anytime soon or that even makes it. There are lots of obstacles between here and his first opening day. And second, since he is 19 or 20 years old, he's not going to be there next season. That's not someone they can just say, oh, well, it's not like the Yankees with Anthony Volpe, who they can just say, we don't need to get a shortstop this offseason. We've got this kid who's tearing the minor leagues apart. We're just going to let him do this and figure it out from there. The Red Sox aren't in that position. And for as much as people say, oh, they have Trevor Story, though, Trevor Story, for one, did not have a very good season. 2, seems much better suited to second base at this point in his career than shortstop, given his arm troubles. And 3, that's only really a temporary solution. Plus, it also means, well, now you got to go find a second baseman. And the market for second baseman this winter is really not a good one. It feels like it never is at this point. But that which is kind of thing is like, if you want to replace Xander Bogaerts and replace his production essentially 1-to-1, then you also have to play at that top end of the market anyway. You're going to have to go out or get a Trey Turner or a Dansby Swanson or someone along those lines. You can't just go out and sign Jose Iglesias and say done and move on from there unless you're willing to upgrade significantly somewhere else. You can let Xander Bogaerts walk, as much as it hurts me, if the fallback plan is we use that money to sign Wilson Contreras at catcher and add one of the better free agent pitchers to the top of the rotation that really, really needs it.
Does that sound like what Chaim Bloom would do?
No, and that's kind of the concern. That's not how I expect things to go. The Story signing, what really surprised me about it was that the team was willing to go there, but I also think that's not something you can count on. And regardless, I don't think this is a situation where even if Boston does want to make that kind of hand out that kind of contract again, I don't think they're going to do more than one in an offseason at this point. I don't think they have the stomach for that. And I do wonder if they decide, if they can come to a deal with Bogaerts, they say, okay, that's that. Like, we'll keep talking with Rafael Devers too, because we want to sign him long-term. But otherwise, we're not getting involved with the big free agents out there, because we need to be smart. We need to be smart with our money. So yeah, and just ultimately, but at the end of the day, it's like, this is not as good a team without Xander Bogaerts. It simply is not, unless the plan is to replace him with one of Turner or Swanson. And I really have a hard time seeing that in either capacity. So yeah, really, really looking forward to this offseason in Boston. Think it's going to be very fun. It's also just such a disheartening.
What are they doing though? Like, if you had to guess what they're doing, like, what is Chaim's actual plan? If you were in the meeting room with him, what do you think his actual plan is here?
Set up the next core.
Okay.
I think part of the issue is that, not issue, but I think the thinking is the Betts situation was one he inherited that I don't know that they really, I mean, obviously if I were in charge of the team, I would have, that would not have happened, but I don't know that was a situation that was ever going to go anywhere other than the way it went. You know what I mean? And I'm starting to wonder if that's kind of the thought process too with Bogaerts and to a certain degree Devers, particularly less so Devers because he's very young. He was younger when he came up than Betts and Bogaerts were. He's, I think, someone that they maybe feel like they can get more of his prime years if they do sign him long term. Bogaerts, on the other hand, just turned 30 this month. But I do wonder if it's kind of just a sense of like we need to let the Dombrowski Red Sox fully turn over while we bolster the farm system, and then we can start that current game in baseball of. I think the goal for Bloom is, and I imagine this is probably the goal for most of the GMs in baseball is what Alex Anthopoulos is doing in Atlanta. You bring those young guys up, and once you're pretty confident that they are the productive players you want them to be, you dangle a long-term contract extension in front of them. But when they're still young enough that free agency is so far away and so theoretically risky to them that they're going to be willing to sign it. And that's not to say that, like, I don't think, for example, that like Michael Harris or Spencer Strider like did something wrong by signing their extensions. That is life-changing money that they were handed. And I think in all cases, I think the Atlanta probably got a deal that would have been better for them than if all those guys had gone to than they would have gotten later on. But I think the Albies extension is really the only one where you're like, that's just flat out unfair. You took advantage of the guy. Like, I think they're getting reasonable money. They could make more in free agency probably, but I also think they're getting a reasonable deal. And I think that ultimately is probably what Bloom wants, because I don't think ultimately he wants to replicate Tampa down to the screw. Yeah. Because Boston doesn't have to run Tampa payrolls.
It's also just flat out Tampa if you're going to do that.
Yeah, that's the other part of it. Like, why would you even leave at that point? Yeah. I think the idea is, you look at the young players who are in that system, like Mayer, like Tristan Casas, like one of the very fast rising prospects in that system, Miguel Bleis. You look at those guys and you start to think when they get to the majors, we need to lock them down as soon as we can. Because I think part of the problem with this team right now is the window to do that. Obviously, the window for that for Betts was closed long before Bloom ever got there. But I think the window to do that with Bogaerts and potentially with Devers may not. I don't think Bloom was put in charge early enough to try to take advantage of the window he would have wanted to try to hammer out something long term with the two of them. And so I think between that and between stuff like, hey, Chris Sale's contract still sucks immensely and we don't know what to do about him, I think they're just elements of we kind of just need to just shuffle out all of the previous kind of regime's moves and kind of shuffle out the players who we can't control any longer and start building something entirely different and new. And I'm not 100% against that, because I do think that in a lot of ways, particularly with regards to the farm system, Bloom got dealt a bad hand to a certain degree by Dombrowski. That there was not the depth necessary to keep the. I think if the Red Sox had continued on that same path, they would be in a similar place to where the Mets are, where you're looking at $300 million plus just to keep the team together. I think the goal is, can we do that, but at like $200 million, at $180 million, at whatever it happens to be. And I think the only way you're going to be able to do that is the way the Braves have done it. You've got to get to the guys early, and you've got to sign them to those long-term extensions early. That's the only way you can do it. It's about implementing cost control as early and as quickly and as effectively as you can. Because otherwise, I don't, if that's not the goal, then I don't really know what the point is. Because that to me seems like the only the only logical place for this to end is, and it'd be funny too if everyone just decides we're just going to start imitating Anthopoulos and the Braves. That's all that everyone wants to do at this point. Because you have to say, like, between Harris, Strider, Riley, Acuna, Albies, I'm sure I'm forgetting someone in there in terms of
Grissom hasn't come up yet.
What they've done is just remarkable. Just absolutely remarkable.
Riley.
When that Spencer Strider extension came out, my Twitter timeline was nothing but Aaron Paul from Breaking Bad with the head up doing he can't keep getting away with this. Like,
but if you listen to what they're saying, and this is why you can't really replicate it in Atlanta, is the culture with the team. Like those guys enjoy it. Part of it is like they're close. Like Spencer Strider's from Knoxville. Michael Harris is from
like,
Atlanta.
I was going to say, did you know Michael Harris is from Atlanta? I only
Yeah.
heard that on the broadcast yesterday about 38,000 times.
Yeah. So
Guys, we get it. He's from Atlanta. Jeez. God.
Do you know Dansby was from Kennesaw? Right outside?
No way.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know Matt Olson is from the area?
Did you know? I mean, did he go to my high school? People are saying, like Austin Riley is from Northern Mississippi. That's where the Braves, minor league, like the AA Braves, like that's part of it. Is that I think a lot of these guys actually grew up Braves fans, and I think a lot of them just part of it is that part of it is important to them that their family can come see them and that their family can root for them and watch them, and it's like a communal thing. The other part of it is just that like the Braves just won the World Series. The Braves are winning 100 games. The Braves are a really good franchise that looks like they're going to be good. Like it's easier to have that culture stuff and to get guys to buy in and come to a deal now when you're winning. Like that is a big part of this is that they are winning and winning a lot of games.
Like I think that's a big part of what's kind of complicated things in Boston too is there's no stability or there hasn't been stability, in that organization for a bit.
Yeah.
You know, Chaim Bloom is the 4th general manager, I believe, since Theo Epstein left. Alex Cora obviously is a good manager, but also was full ass suspended for a year.
4th GM? Who are the 4?
Ben Cherington. I'm sorry, 3rd is Ben Cherington, Dave Dombrowski, and then Chaim Bloom.
Okay, I was like, was there 4? Am I?
No, I added a ghost GM. But either way, like this isn't, and not only that, but like obviously baseball in Boston is different than baseball in Atlanta in terms of the expectations and the media and all this other stuff. And the Braves do have that unique to them built-in advantage that the area where they are is one of the baseball hotbeds of the country. You know, top prospects come out of there all the time. So it's much easier for them to find someone who is local to the area and who actually cares about that kind of stuff or who wants to be close to home and can say, well, then you guess what? You have one team that you can do that with.
Yes.
So until the state of Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, or Louisiana ends up getting a team.
Yeah.
Although New Orleans baseball team would be kind of cool.
I don't think that's happening.
No, it's not going to happen. But yeah, I think that there is a lot to be said too about the culture in Atlanta, and too, like it's also very clear like how much the players there love Brian Snitker.
Yeah.
How much of that he is a part of that. How good Anthopoulos is at his job. How good the Braves just are at the things they do, and yeah, that counts for a lot. Like.
And I think the agents have to trust the Braves front office too. I think
it seems like they do, with the exception of Freddie Freeman's agent. Former
agent. Get into that one. Oh my God. The Robbie Ray decision. We should talk about what happened here. So we're not going to dive into the ALDS and the NLDS all that much yet because the games are still happening and we'll have more of that this following week. But that was wild. The Yordan homer was just a backbreaker for Seattle. A lot has been made about the managerial choices by Scott Servais, and I want to get your perspective. Y'all had a really good piece on Fangraphs, I believe by Jay Jaffe on
Jake
the decision.
Mailhot.
Was it what?
Jake Mailhot.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I'm actually sorry. My apologies to Jake. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. If Mailhot isn't the way you say it.
Okay, there you go. Apologies. A lot of Jakes, like Jay.
Yeah, we have for some reason we have a lot of J folks.
No more Jakes. No more J's for a little bit. Fangraphs has got to take it easy. We need some more C names. Haven't seen a lot.
Graphs.
Yeah. Where's a Corey out there? Is there a Corey?
The January 6 graphs.
Oh, cool.
Advanced analytics on a coup attempt. Wins above replacement rioter.
Oh my God. Shout out to the $1 billion that was handed out today. John.
Yes.
The move though itself at the time, you're sitting there on the couch. Did you see that actually coming? Did you see a Yordan bomb? Did you immediately see that this was a mistake, or was this a hindsight 2020 thing for Seattle?
I think it can be both in the sense that no, I don't know. In retrospect, I don't think it was a mistake ultimately because I think it was more, and I think Jake made a good point of kind of getting here, is that this was a damned if you do, damned if you don't spot for the Mariners. Like, what it boiled down to was that was the last batter on earth they wanted to see at that plate in that moment. But once it got to that point, they really did not have good options for how to deal with him. Because, I mean, this is where the Mariners were at this point. They had already used three of their better relievers, Andres Munoz, Diego Castillo, and Matt Brash, just to get to that point, because Logan Gilbert wasn't able to get out of the sixth inning for them.
Mm-hmm.
They had already put Paul Sewald in, who had already put 2 base runners on. And regardless of the season he's had, I can understand Scott Servais feeling like, hey, this maybe isn't the best guy for this moment. Like, maybe we need to change something else. And I can understand Ray being the choice because, I mean, it's been pointed out, Alvarez doesn't really have platoon splits because he's such a phenomenally good hitter that I don't think it was simply a matter of we're going to put a lefty in there to try to get the lefty-lefty advantage. I mean, it doesn't hurt, but it's also not something that I think really made much of a difference. Nor do I think it was something as simple as like, oh, there's one pitch. It's been noted that like that Ray threw 2 pitches to Alvarez, 2 sinkers. One of them was fouled off at approximately 200 miles an hour. The other was hit approximately 200 miles an hour, like 500 feet.
Mm-hmm.
But that is what the Mariners want. And Scott Servais said after the game, like, we had been planning for that matchup to be a possibility, which also suggests that Ray wasn't going to pitch and is not going to start in this series, which I find fascinating on its own. But so I think that was something they had thought about. They wanted to try to get a lefty arm who can throw a sinker, a pitch that Alvarez still hits well, but doesn't hit as well as he hits fastballs and sliders. Try to put it in a place where he couldn't get the barrel on it, couldn't lift it, just beat it into the ground. And I think the other part of it is when you look at the rest of the Mariners bullpen, aside from Eric Swanson, who's one of their better high leverage relievers, but hasn't really, I don't think, pitched at all in this postseason yet, there's not really a guy left over there they can turn to. Matt Boyd is the only other lefty in that bullpen, and I cannot imagine that's a thing that any Mariners fan wanted to see. And the rest of that bullpen is right-handers who throw fastball, slider. That it's that's like, this is all kind of getting to the point. There's no good matchup there. There's simply nothing you can really do if you're the Mariners, because you do not have that one pitcher who throws that one pitch that is guaranteed to get Alvarez out or minimize the damage. Excuse me. The thing they were left with was the best of a bad scenario, because ultimately the second it got to the point where Alvarez stepped to the plate, the Mariners were kind of screwed.
Yeah,
because they didn't have the pieces necessary to get him out. But also, it's worth noting too, they were screwed because Yordan Alvarez is one of the best hitters in baseball. Flat out, no what's the word I'm looking for? No qualifiers, no nothing like that. He's just one of the best hitters in baseball. No caveats. Thank you. Like, there's not a whole lot you can do in those scenarios. Like, replace Alvarez with Mookie Betts or with Aaron Judge or with Bryce Harper or with, whoever you want. It's a similar scenario. It's like, there aren't many pitchers on earth who you're like, yeah, this is like, we've got this now. Like, this dude's just going to lock him. He's a really good hitter, and he did what a really good hitter did. He took a pitch, and I think if anything, this was the mistake there. It was just the execution. The Mariners got themselves into a situation where they had the best possible option to them on the mound, throwing the pitch that they wanted to be thrown at that point, but Ray just left it in a place where Alvarez hit the crap out of it. And I think that's just, and like you said earlier, capital T, capital B, that's baseball sometimes. You can make all the plans in the world. You can have all the options available to you, but it ends up relying on that player being able to execute the particular pitch, and Ray just didn't do it. So I don't necessarily know if it was over managing by Scott Servais. I mean, I'm sure in retrospect, well, I actually don't know. I don't know if you asked him in retrospect, would you have changed anything? I don't know that he would have. Because again, the only 2 options he had otherwise were continue with Paul Sewald, which I don't know was any better of a bet to do any better, or go to a worse reliever instead. And I know that there was theoretically the option of, we'll just intentionally walk Alvarez and pitch to Alex Bregman, get the right on right matchup. But the other side of that is, you want to pitch to Alex Bregman with the bases loaded in a 2-run game when he's already homered in the game. Like, how is that better? That's not better. That is, if anything, worse. By run expectancy, that is way worse. You put yourself in a far worse position to win the game if you do that. So I think, and part of that's baseball aspect of it is the Mariners just ended up in the worst possible position for them to be in. That game had to end before Yordan Alvarez stepped to the plate. And to that, you can credit I've forgotten his name, unfortunately, but the Astros rookie who pinch hit for Martin Maldonado and worked a very nice at-bat before he got plunked. You can credit Jeremy Pena, who had a great 2-strike approach to hit a single to keep the inning alive. You can credit a lot, and especially just the way Houston never gave up. And that is the thing with this Astros team. They never die. They don't ever die. And I think Seattle's just the latest team to learn that really, really painful lesson that you need to bury this Astros team 6 feet deep and cover them with quicklime if you want to get rid of them. They are a menace, in part because of Alvarez, but just in part because that whole team never, ever gives up.
That's why you draft Drew Gilbert in the first round if you're Houston. You got to keep that continuity going. The never give up, just menace mentality. And that's what Drew Gilbert was for the Tennessee.
How many Tennessee players are currently on the Astros right now?
I think that's
Zero, right? Zero.
Well, I mean, on the actual Astros, yes.
So, in other words, Tennessee has nothing to do with the current state of the Astros.
I don't know. I feel like there was a little bit of a bump.
This is like John Goodman in The Big Lebowski, where he's always bringing up Vietnam, and then you got Jeff Bridges being like, "What does Vietnam have to do with anything here?"
Look, John, anytime I can bring up some of the things that I love dearly and equate them somehow, some way to other conversations, I'm going to do it.
You're going to get Drew Gilbert up there either next year or the year after that. So, eventually at some point, you're going to get a Ben Joyce, Drew Gilbert matchup in a random AL West game. And that's going to be tough for you.
That will be tough for me. It's going to be tough for Drew and Ben. Like, do they do does Ben just walk him out of a courtesy?
No, he hits him because they hate each other.
That would hurt. Ben Joyce 105.5 heater would not feel great. Just
ask all the people who've gotten plunked by Aroldis Chapman over the years how that one felt. Which also, and I know this wasn't on there, but I want to take a moment to highlight the end of the Aroldis Chapman era in New York, ending the only way it could, which is him being essentially kicked off the team for deciding he was too good to show up for a postseason workout. Yeah, absolutely phenomenal work. A+ all around. Congrats to one of the stupidest baseball players, clearly, of the last, forever. Boy, that was really funny. That was just... I need
more to that story. Is that really just it?
Yep, that's just it. He decided... I think it had become... the Yankees had basically told him, look, we're not sure if you're going to make the postseason roster, but come to the workout because we haven't decided. And he was just like, no, I'm not doing that. He was like, I'm either on the postseason roster or I'm not. And so they're like, okay, then you're not. Go home.
I mean, that is just... Is this it? Like,
for Chapman
where does he
in New
even
York?
Go next
Absolutely.
Year? Does he get picked up?
I think some team will, because I think if nothing else, he'll be available at a relative discount. I think there are not going to be too many serious contenders interested in him, both after the year he had and also just the fact that he seems to be, how do I put it charitably, kind of an asshole. So... I can definitely... I think some team will still give him a chance. So he's still Aroldis Chapman. Someone will try to figure that out. But it's pretty safe to say his time in New York is done.
Does that affect how you see the Yankees postseason run going at all?
No, I didn't think... I was honestly rooting as a non-Yankees fan. I was very much hoping he would be on the roster because that would guarantee at least one blown game on their part. But I mean, it's funny because there's been a lot of noise made about how the Yankees bullpen is in a pretty tough state. It's not the same bullpen as they've had throughout the season because of all the injuries they've suffered. But they looked plenty fine last night between Jonathan Loaisiga, Wandy Peralta, and Clay Holmes. They got through Cleveland no real problem. On the other hand, Cleveland's offense is, how do you say, dog shit. So I also don't know how much I don't know how much, if the Yankees advance, I don't know how much we're necessarily going to learn about them in the process other than, oh yeah, this team is still really good.
Brian Cashman said about Chapman going AWOL, he said, quote, shocking, but not surprising. Oof.
I think that pretty well sums it up. I think, and I think too, when you look at, you remember that whole thing where he had to go on the injured list for a month because he got an infection from a tattoo he got?
Vaguely.
Yeah, that happened back in August, I believe. I mean, when something like that has already happened over the course of the season,
just careless.
That's the thing. It's both careless and it's just inconsiderate in a way of just like, do you not realize that it's not just about you? It's about the rest of the guys on this team too. Like, that's what matters.
It's probably also not a good vibe that like everyone's okay with it. But the Efros injury is also a factor into this.
And that's a really tough one too. I mean, similarly with the Braves losing Tyler Matzik, I didn't even realize he had been hurting, much less that he had blown out his elbow completely. That's a really tough one for Atlanta. But
he should be blooper, by the way. They should allow him to be blooper for the rest of the postseason.
I think they should let blooper pitch. I would be for that. Okay. Generally,
but it like with Tyler Matzik's right hand, or like how are we doing?
I don't know. It doesn't matter. I just want to see blooper pitch.
That'd be fun. That could be something they could add to the All-Star game. Is just get the mascots in there.
There should be that's a really good idea. There should be an All-Star game for the mascots in mascot costume.
That would be fun. I would much rather watch that than anything else they do at the All-Star game.
Why are we still doing the celebrity softball game when that's an option instead?
That's a good point. Like Rob Manfred, friend of the pod, noted capital.
Noted friend of the pod, Rob Manfred. He was a regular guest on here. He comes on for Thirsty Thursdays and you guys talk IPAs.
I don't know.
I don't think he drinks, honestly. I think if he drinks like crappy wine and just gets mad about it. It's also just kind of fun to imagine his like little like gap tooth thing, but with like red wine stains.
There you go.
I've just made it so that like whatever like tiny hopes you had of getting Rob Manfred on here ever.
It's gone. Like he's not doing the pod, but I don't think he does any media. I've never seen like a Rob Manfred
doesn't. He does like 1 or 2 interviews a year, if that, and they always have to be with guys like Tom Verducci, who are basically just not going to call him to task on.
Mm-hmm.
And which is I shouldn't be that like Verducci is obviously a great reporter and an iconic reporter, but someone also who knows he knows how to play nice when he needs to play nice.
Right, he's just been in it forever. Like it's just one of those. He's in the club. Like I think it's just
Manfred is not a guy who likes making media appearances. He doesn't like talking.
Yeah, which I get. I think if I was a commissioner, I don't think I'd ever do interviews. Nothing good. The best case scenario is it's neutral.
I wouldn't be saying shit. I would just be doing like turning the bases into marshmallows and be like, "You want me to give comments? Screw you." No, like I do what I want.
I'm from all this, John. It's like I'm going to be in the mountains in my cabin, pushed away in the Smokies, and that's it. Like no interviews, no anything. I'm just gone.
No, the only time people will see you in public would be when you're just at random Tennessee games.
Yes, that's it.
And they'd be like, "Mr. Commissioner," and be like, "Not while I'm here."
Yes.
Not while I'm watching
when
you're like, undefeated Tennessee Volunteers play whoever the hell they're playing this Saturday.
I'm sorry. Are you pretending that you're not familiar with the Tennessee-Alabama game, the third Saturday in October this weekend?
I actually had no idea that they were going to play Alabama.
3:30 CBS.
So what you're saying is you guys actually finally, for the first time in like 2 decades, have a reasonable right to say we want Bama.
Yes. It's pretty nice.
That's fun. That counts for something.
I cannot wait for this.
You always want to play the best.
You do. And actually compete against the best. That's even better when it's not a blowout. No, it's going to be fun. Jon Tayler, what can the good folks check out from you over on Fangraphs.com this week?
Playoffs. Obviously, game recaps of every game as it goes on. We'll have, as you know, we talked about the piece with Jake. You know, if there's ever anything, or if there are things that happen during those games that deserve a closer look, a little more detail, you know, we have that. Obviously, too, we'll be preparing ahead for the offseason because once the World Series is over, we'll put out our top 50 free agents list. So that's still a few weeks away, but something to keep in mind. Yes, there will be an offseason, and this time it will not be messed up by a bunch of angry billionaires deciding they don't want to spend money anymore. So definitely definitely come to Fangraphs for all our playoffs coverage. Become a member while you're there. Sign up, $60 for 1 year of ad-free browsing. And if you're at all interested, if you're following the playoffs at a bar, in the stands, just while you're walking around and bumping into people, download the Fangraphs app so you can keep up with everything, especially our updated postseason odds, including our Zips, Damon Borski's creation, our Zips game-by-game and series odds that take into account lineups, starting pitchers, the previous day's game, all that fun stuff. So come on over to Fangraphs. We are doing playoffs. We're playoffs.
Yeah, and I love that you guys had just manipulated the system a little bit to ensure that the Braves were the favorite.
They're not the favorite anymore by our projections, right?
You're cutting out.
Okay.
John?
Yep. All right.
Well, John? I don't know. I guess we lost him. For that guy up there in New York City, Jon Tayler, for myself down here in Knoxville, Tennessee, that is all we've got. But more postseason baseball to talk about next week. Unless the Braves series goes awry, then we'll just talk about the ALDS. Jon Tayler, always a pleasure, and I will talk to you next week.
Yep.